Sometimes it's when I have a head of a doctor or a head of a lawyer, not but for doctor, not of a lawyer. That's the thing. And what I can do talk today is when this game. Just imagine a situation that the father of the family is as a part of the law. And the family is most relaxed. After half an hour, so you go from hospital, hey, gentlemen, we have some single like that. Is the sound of relief at the same time? And how this happened? Watch. It goes fully connected. I have no Mumbai and yeah, and this was available everywhere. Also, that he had some arrhythmias, which is irregular heartbeat, which went to a doctor connected on that watch. The hospital was connected to that watch. Ambulance service was connected to the watch. And before family got the information, the hospital and doctor got the information, and he was taken immediately in real time, and patient was saved. A great thing that can happen. There is another paradox to this. Another family, the elderly father goes for a walk, and the family is quite relaxed. He is wearing the best possible watch, and nothing is going to happen. Just stay relaxed. Half an hour passes, and suddenly the news comes that somebody is found unconscious on the road, and we're trying to find out, and got a number somehow when calling you. And the son gets confused. Hey, he's wearing the best possible watch. Why should I worry? But the battery of the watch was dead. So these type of situations have started happening. I know technology is the greatest enabler, no question about it. And as long as it is used and reaches the best people at the right time. And when you talk of healthcare, I always think of camera on a tripod. And we heard that also in the beginning, that one leg is affordability, second leg is accessibility, and third leg is safety. And lies on that tripod is a wonderful camera, which is a patient. So be it regulations, be it technology, be it any function that is happening, they revolve around these 3 and 4 points. And then when it comes to patient, it is care and privacy everywhere. Whether it India also is going to, I will discuss that, very interesting data privacy laws very soon. So this is what I just want to briefly discuss these points and just share thoughts with you. So I'll just start with you. Before, of course, I'll ask you a question, a very quick, brief introduction about yourself so that relate what you're talking. And once you introduce, I just want to touch upon, just take us through the story of wearables, from experience we know, and the need of the right technology to reach the right people at the right time, especially when we are talking about patient care, which is paramount. Quick introduction and let's discuss this.
Yes, thank you. Again, I'm Joe Lancaster, Vice President of Product Management for EAI at Solix Technologies. And, I think first I just want to say how amazing it is that we live in an age where a small device on your wrist can paint an incredible view of your physiology. That is something that is, I don't know if you guys grew up watching Star Trek like I did, but I gotta say, I feel like I'm starting to live the dream. So it's not, uncommon to see a smart device on, kind of like almost every other person's wrist these days is what I see. And that's going to lead to incredible opportunity to improve patients' outcomes. And I think, for technologists like myself, we tend to, geek out on the technology and love, data and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's all about how can we improve the patients' lives, right? How do we tie it all back from there? So, I think the key is really focusing on how do we get devices that are affordable, so that they can be kind of ubiquitous. how can they be turned into actionable insights, right? Garbage in, garbage out, and the classic adage. But we need to turn it into things that can modify behaviors, inform care. And, one interesting, device and class of medical devices that are out are these continuous glucose monitorings. As an example, think about, being able to have a patient that constantly knows what their glucose levels are. Then they eat something and they can see the response in real time, right? So, the patient can then say, I eat beef or pulled pork or chicken, and my blood pressure spiked. The idea is that not every human has the same response, and so you really have the opportunity to personalize your care, personalize down to that individual's physiology and metabolic health, and that's a real game changer. The other thing with continuous glucose monitors is that 9 out of 10 patients with prediabetes don't have any idea that they've got prediabetes. So this would actually be a way to potentially be proactive, go from reactive to proactive, and potentially capture and treat that condition before it progresses, and maybe even reverse it through lifestyle modifications and medications. So I think it's an incredible place to be. I think the key will be reducing the costs, getting availability, and really focusing on outcomes, both for the patient and then training the clinicians so that they're not just overloaded with yet another data stream that they have to deal with.
I'm Sreeram, and we are playing in the cardiac space, as you can tell, the cardiac cloud part, and particularly going after preventive care for CVDs or cardiovascular diseases. One thing I think, before we dive into where wearables are, it's important to understand the state of the market. So where is healthcare in general? Let's talk about US healthcare first. So if you look at US healthcare, we spend anywhere between 17 to 19% of our GDP in taking care of our healthcare, which is a significant amount. Mind you, most of the countries in the world don't spend anything close to that, number one. Second, so where do we spend it? Fine, we spend a huge amount of GDP, but where do we spend it? We spend a lot of it on chronic care management. And particularly, even in chronic care management, there is 5 or 6 diseases, and topping all of them is cardiovascular diseases, which are cause the biggest reason for fatalities, number one. Second, hypertension, diabetes, and COPD, or respiratory diseases or pulmonary diseases. So if you spend 80 to 90% caring for the chronic care, clearly we need to be focused on fixing that problem, which is what kind of wearables do we do? What kind of stuff, technology do we bring on the table to make and reduce the costs while we take care of better lives and bringing the better lives to it. So in that aspect, so if I look at how things are evolving, I think, there are different pieces coming along, and then where are wearables focused? How are they going after the market? So you see some segment of the wearables going after fitness markets. They want to know how many steps you have taken today and how well I'm keeping myself fit. That's one part of it. The second part of the wearables, if you look at it, are wearables focused on general awareness. I mean, what's my blood pressure today? What's my sugar level today? Just a general sense of what overall health. So what does that do? That gives you some sense of guidance, that gives you a behavioral change of habits to better manage your healthcare. And tertiarily, the more important part, the third part, is devices focused on really doing diagnoses and providing diagnostic stuff for you. And that too on a preventive level, because when you go into prevention, you're going to reduce costs, save lives in a big way at the end of the day. So broadly speaking, these are the different categories. So I'll also, since we were talking about it, I'll throw a little bit of a negative light on how things are working also. So people, for example, are wearing an Apple Watch today, right? They look at it, it's great about arrhythmia detection. It gives you when you have an AFib, right? It tells you when there's atrial fibrillation. The problem is it's giving a lot of false positives. And it's actually inundating our healthcare system. So, we work with 300, 400 hospitals across the US, and cardiologists constantly complain to me when I go meet them, I didn't have this many patients, and that too, patients that believe they have a problem with it. with their heart. So what's happening is we truly need to get focused on increasing the accuracy of our so-called lifestyle variables. Maybe they are saving a few lives, I'm not going to take that away, but it's important that their accuracy goes up tremendously so that when they walk into a physician's office, it's truly a heart condition that needs to be addressed. Because, one of the problems I'm sure all of you are aware of, we have serious burnouts of physicians, we have serious shortage of physicians. So our healthcare system itself is not able to handle what it is that we're trying to do in the process. So I think, improvement of variables, both from medical grade stuff, which we are doing at our level, is very important. Improvement of variables for lifestyle behavioral changes is also very, very important. And then, of course, the other layers that they've been talking about, which is access to the information. How does a physician actually create a care plan? How does the physician monitor the patient? All that stuff we do today, and it's a growing problem, and we're doing a lot of AI around it too, so I'll talk a little more, otherwise I'll take all the time.
I think you touch upon a very important point, and dependency on this is going to be a big issue. I'll just pick your brains on that. And variables leading to lifestyle changes or behavioral changes. I myself is wearing Libre here, and just now before coming here, I just saw my number, whether I should eat something after half an hour or not, and I know what I need to do. That definitely is changing the scenario. So Rajesh, I'll just come to you. Of course, first quick introduction. And AI is a buzzword, maybe, or AI is there. I don't know whether AI is there or not, whether AI will be there or not, especially from healthcare point of view. It is either hard to easy or easy to hard. It's very difficult to ascertain. So can you just share your thoughts on how AI, you're into that space, of course, how it can really take the quantified self, I call it a wired self rather than the quantified self, to the next level, if at all required, with reference to healthcare, and how it can happen.
I don't feel qualified about talk about healthcare, but I can say something about AI.
AI is everywhere, so talk.
Just as a way of background, I started as a chip designer at Intel, but for the last 30 years, I've been a professor of computer science. And I was chair of computer science at UC San Diego, and then founded the Kali Juolo Data Science Institute, which is really an institute on AI and machine learning. And that has about 50 faculty now, 1,400 students. And we have just launched the School of Computing, Information, Data Science, for which I serve as an interim dean. Coming to AI and what is easy and hard about AI. The surprising development in last 10 years in machine learning has been that if there is a pattern, the machines are very good in identifying that pattern, detecting that pattern. And this was a very big surprise for us because this was a very hard problem. Of course, we can all see patterns. We can see regular waveforms, but complicated patterns. A picture is a complicated pattern. For example, recognizing patterns in data became very easy because of the advances in computing and algorithms. Of course, in order to get the patterns, you need to have the data to give you the patterns. And so we started recognizing text, we started recognizing speech, we started recognizing images, and all of those were patterns. And when it comes to health, quantification was one way you could get the data first. If you don't have data, you don't have patterns to detect. And so all the quantification, and there are challenges there, whether it's your ring, whether it's a watch, whether it is whatever else you have, even medical data, can I mine those patterns? That was the obvious question. Well, what was easy also became very hard in medical care settings. Because you see, when you see a picture of a cat on a YouTube video or even on a picture, okay, the cat remains a cat regardless of the background. But if you look at a time series data, that data may mean completely different things depending upon the context in which it is placed. And the data of medical care is extremely context dependent, and that context is not captured. So we talk about a very large funnel of data. So we do have the data, But we don't have a whole lot of labels on that data, because labels requires an expert called an MD to look at all the data and then say, well, this is what this means. And there is no automatic way of identifying that data. So what is very easy for us in computing, in data science and machine learning is extraordinarily hard to say, we'll just capture all the data and detect a fibrillation, which is a scaling problem, or detect some other condition. One of the biggest nightmares in medical care is detecting things too late. Anybody who has had cancer, anybody who has had conditions that could have been detected earlier were not detected, and we somehow missed it. The medical care errors are very large. We talk about false positive of Apple Watch, talk about the medical errors, which is even larger. So those are the biggest challenges. On the other hand, I saw the demonstration of Optimus Prime, and Optimus was a great robot. Robotics is a hard problem in real life. But we have been using microsurgery, and Da Vinci is pretty successfully, prostate and others. So medical care actually has advanced in many areas which are actually harder in those areas. So that sort of is the dividing line. I'll stop there.
One thing that has come out from what he just mentioned is data. And I think data being generated through technology, be it AI or machine learning, or across all things getting digital, wearables, everything. That reminds me of something very interesting which I heard somewhere. I'm sorry, it goes in Hindi, sorry for that. That earlier we used to say, Bhagwan deta hai, God gives. But now, Bhagwan data hai. That is the situation that has come, and we need to respect that data. When you talk of data, immediately comes confidentiality, privacy. We have here HIPAAs and other laws. India also has come out with very strong and tough law on data privacy. We are expecting rules which is going to really change the law, and where health data is considered not a critical data but just a personal data. So lots of issues are likely to happen. But that leads to data privacy being one of the limitations. So I'll just come to you, Sreeram, then I'll come to you. You talked about false positive, false negative. And which is a huge concern, because being a surgeon 20 years ago for 14 years, we always thought, should I treat patient or should I treat report? Or should I treat patient or should I treat data? Because sometimes treating data may lead to harm to patients, and treating patients without data can also lead to harm to patients. So there needs to be a balance on that. Quickly, on maybe 2-3 minutes, we want to touch upon other limitations on wearable.
We've had the same problem. So we had to build the entire AI engine to detect arrhythmias in cardiac space. And now we're also building generative AI on top of that. But that's exactly what we do. So we have a huge team in the back end. Although we do thousands of studies every month, somebody is annotating the data. So first of all, a cardiac technician, a certified cardiac technician, annotates the data. And once it's annotated, a physician, a cardiologist actually looks at it and approves it. So you have to create a huge data pool or a data lake to start building the whole neural networks around building the AI part. And I think it's going to continue being a challenge, because sometimes what I've observed is even annotating the data or labeling the data, as you call it, is subjective. I mean, you look at a certain rhythm pattern, you take a human, and human interpretation has always got a certain tolerance around it. So we are also looking at the possibility actually of annotating the data, but by 2 or 3 people, to see how accurately we can actually predict the stuff. So first of all, the whole AI, the data lake, moving the annotated data, building the AI engines to detect arrhythmia is all, is moving along. And of course, while the AI data part is moving along, and then the complexity comes when you start annotating the data for a simple variable, it's fine. But the more complex you get, for example, when you talk about deterioration of the cardiac conditions, there's so many comorbidities. You're talking about somebody could be hypertensive, somebody could be diabetic. So then you have to build a predictive model around how quickly that heart is going to deteriorate. And then genetic dispositions, race dispositions. So we're talking again, the pattern recognition, the work that we are beginning to do, we are very much at a very nascent stage of what needs to be accomplished. Because you got to think about it. There's a certain level of, sorry to say this, but there's a physician incompetence also, because when you look at the subjective distribution of the physicians all around the world, you're truly talking about an A-class, top-notch cardiovascular surgeon that can detect things like that, versus somebody in Timbuktu with not much of a broader experience to detect that. So even within that range of cardiovascular physicians, I think AI is going to play a tremendous amount of role in the process. So at least we are betting on it, and let's see what happens. But that's the hope of where we're going. I think, there are going to be, false positives and false negatives. And I think how do we reduce that becomes very important. That means the maturity of the AI technology, the maturity of the actual technology itself. For example, just to give an example, AI, as far as Apple Watch is concerned, it never measures the true EKG, because the EKG is the measurement of your millivolt voltage across your heart, right, at different points. But in order to do that, you need point A and point B so you can actually measure the voltage. So Apple Watch claims they're doing an EKG and they're detecting AFib, but they're truly not measuring it. It's a approximation based on the blood flow. So how do you change that? The only way an Apple Watch can truly measure EKG is if you put your other finger on the other side. So all of a sudden, your length of your entire arm becomes a single lead for it to measure. So technology, I think, has to evolve significantly in order to reduce that. And I think we have to attack that problem. Otherwise, we are, injecting more trouble into the healthcare system where we're saying, you know what, we are ready, we give it to you, but you kind of start suspecting your own health condition very quickly. Too quick to think that you have a problem.
So Raj, I'll come to you. He touched upon a very important point, and we heard pluses, minuses, good and bad, merits, demerits of getting quantified, how technology or AI can help you, and you have a lot of first-hand experiences. Can you just tell us how technology can be a greatest enabler using getting quantified or using technology like AI, machine learning, or what he just suggested, that put a finger like this, then you get the correct information. Can technology help there? Just share your thoughts on that.
So my name is Raj Patil. I'm part of IBM, senior technical leader. For the past year and a half, of course, with the Gen AI picking up significantly, I've been working with a lot of companies who want to, leverage AI into their solution, right? And a lot of them are healthcare providers. Small to medium size is the other types of companies that I've been working with. And I would say that AI has been a great enabler for them to reach to a larger audience, right? So I'll give you some examples, right? So a few of the startups that I'm working with are more, related to dealing with, women's health, right? So they are into, women who are having reproductive issues, or they want to deal with that, or somebody who wants to, women that have postpartum problem. So different startups, right? Again, companies, they have a niche market, maybe leverage, going after the Latin America market or something like that. Now, for them to be able to reach to a wider audience, it wasn't possible without AI, because then they had to provide live agents to answer all the questions. Now, in the morning kickoff, somebody talked about natural language is a great enabler, right? So using natural language, asking questions to the AI chatbot, saying, I'm having this problem, is this the right thing, or what medication do I take? Now, having that AI, leverage the repository that they have, all the information that they already have created. So rather than a live agent answering those questions, having AI answer those questions, right? Understanding the questions in any language, right? Again, these are small things, right? But these small things help their patients significantly, right? And help them scale their business significantly. I think that comes from the patient angle, right? Like, making it more helpful, right? The entire system being helpful for the patient. The second aspect is, I think, and I was telling Brendan that he took my thunder away, is from the doctor's perspective, right? He talked about the case where when you go to visit a doctor, the doctor's busy, looking at your reports on his computer, and he's like scanning through it. He's looking at your reports from 6 months back. I actually, went to my doctor, I had an annual physical, and that's what he did. He said, oh, let me look at what your, lipid profile was a year back. And he was looking through all the numbers and said, oh, this one, has gone down, or this one has gone up. Now, rather than that, AI could have just provided him a summary of the entire background of, all my reports, right? Would have had that in front of him. He didn't have to do all that analysis. Now, again, he could do that, or a simple machine learning could do that. But I think what makes it more interesting, and I think Brendan talked about the Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is using the domain knowledge as well, right? Because a lot of times, when you talk about cardiac numbers, right, or the patients, the type of data you'll have for person with cardiac issues or person with diabetic issues might be different, right? You want to look at the same data differently. So that's where the labeling of the data, that's where the domain-specific data comes in. And I think that's something that's evolving significantly. And I think that's where I do believe that it's going to be a significant growth in the area where it's going to be leveraging domain-specific data. How do we make the information available to doctors as easy as possible, as quickly as possible, so that they can make a decision, right? Because as everybody's been talking about that, we have fewer doctors and the doctors are very busy, right? So you want to make sure that they have the right information, they can make the right decision, and then continue on. And then the last point I just want to make is again, from the patient's perspective, right? A lot of times, and you see this with your relatives as well, right? Something happens, right? You have a stomach ache, or maybe you are vomiting, whatever. The first thing you do is you go to Google and you search for it. Maybe now you go to ChatGPT and then you try to say, okay, I'm having these symptoms. What should I do? Again, that's not a qualified answer, right? That's more of collection of millions of data that somebody has put into blogs, somebody has, put it into their, put it into some forum or something like that. It's scanning the data and giving you the answer, right? Again, that's where I think the domain-specific, these companies providing you the right context, right information based on your history, I think that's going to be very important.
I think very true. And I think next I have a question to all of you. And a very brief 1-minute answer is, where are we heading when we talk of preventative, personalized? I want to add predictive healthcare also, when you get wired and get quantified. And end of the day, remote care, patient care is going to be definitely beneficial. The surgeon in me says that very definitely. But when you talk of this, are we on a freeway or we are on a rumble strip? And do you expect that law and regulations will play a huge role, or there needs to be a conducive environment, regulatory environment?
We are always on the wrong track in the short term, and we are always on the right track in the long term.
Can you define long term?
Yeah, so long term, I think we are fine. It's very hard to predict the impact of the technologies that are emerging today. And anyone who tries to do that has a long, humbling experiences from the past. So, but there are a couple of signs that I think tell us we're in the right spot, or right place. One is all the things, all the decisions, all the inferences, where you can tell the right from the wrong, either retrospectively or statistically, they will become automated. They'll become much better. All the decisions where human judgment is required, from resume reading to interpretation, they are very hard problems. And there's a lot of snake oil that is coming in the form of AI in those areas.
Freeway or rumble strip, and need for a conducive law for this to fly off or go on a freeway.
So that includes like privacy and, it's important that we make progress, but at a pace that is not completely, the old adage, move fast and break things, right? I think That doesn't really apply here to an extent because you could really have real-world impact on people, and that could set the whole industry back. So I think we do need to think about the right ways to approach that. I'm not a policy expert, but I think we need more work. If you look around the world, the EU, China even has recently passed. So I think there's work to be done there, but I don't see it really moving. So I think we should probably make that go faster.
Governance for the AI, I think, is very important, and of course, in the Medicare field, doubly important, right? Because you want to make sure that patients' records and all of that. Of course, there's a HIPAA and all of that already there, but I think that's something that a lot of companies, as they embrace AI, don't think of that, right? Because you say, oh, I'm just going to ask LLM all the information. I'm going to provide all my reports to LLM. But then you don't know if that LLM is going to use that to then train itself, right? And that basically means that you are giving out your data, your private data, which you should not be doing, right? So all of the governance is going to be an important factor that people have to keep in mind as they embrace these AI technologies and figure out, what do they need to do and where do they need to make that data available.
So one thing I think is wearables in general are definitely empowering people all around the world. I think simply because today equity in healthcare is still a big challenge. So if you look at US, for example, simply, if I look at my old generation of cardiac monitoring devices, they cost anywhere from $800 to $1,200 a pop. And for me to say, I'm going to put a device like this in somebody in India or in Africa, it's not going to happen. It's too expensive. But some of the variables that have evolved, because the technology has moved so well from the price point of view, we were able to bring it down to about $30 a pop. Now, all of a sudden, it's more interesting. It's a stronger story. Because now, what we could diagnose with a 7 or 10-day study only in the US, now we can do this in Africa, we can do this in India, and that means we have definitely built more diagnostic capabilities. And I definitely agree as far as the law is concerned, we absolutely need to have privacy. It has to be strengthened out totally, because otherwise this information floating around everywhere, and we got to have governance around that. Second, I think this information can be misused in so many different ways, including accessing variables, because the protocols for locking down, so people can't just access information as they want randomly, also needs to come into play. I mean, there's a lot to evolve. There's no question about it.
So I've come from India, so I need to ask this question. I firmly believe that Indian healthcare is really going great quality-wise, facility-wise, and that's why offshore medical service or medical tourism, we call it, is absolutely there. So I just want to understand from you, when you talk of technology in healthcare, wearables, quantified, how do you see India from Silicon Valley? If given the opportunity, would you go there to do business or have somebody go there and to do business? Yeah, Raj, I'll start with you. Anybody for that matter, not necessarily everybody.
I know a few doctors in India, and then they are really, really good, right? I mean, the quality of education, the quality of the doctors that we have, and the quality of hospitals, right? Because I think at the end of the day, patients look at, am I getting the right, the room, the treatment, the facility, and is it clean, and all of that is there. So definitely there's significant scope for it.
India needs a different marketing strategy. It's very clear to me, because we tried working with a few hospitals in the very price sensitive, structurally the expectations of the hospital, the physician, and us making the money makes it more expensive in India actually. Because here the price point is already set. And as far as the healthcare system, the physicians, there's no extra burden. So maneuvering is slightly more difficult. So I kind of retrenched it back a little. I said, let's build up the US market first, and then we'll re-strategize India, right? But I think India's size of the market is huge. You're talking about, whatever we do in US, the volumes are going to be comparatively nothing compared to what we can build in India. And the need for cardiac care, or need for healthcare in India is tremendous. And I think I also saw a lot of new technologies coming into India very, very fast. And even evolution, for example, the kind of devices that India is building, the innovation that's happening is very, very interesting to even partner on the other side. And I think, India's challenges as far as rural health is concerned, how do we cater to the need of rural needs? How do we cater to the poor? There's so many problems that are getting addressed by Indian innovation. It's a different perspective on that completely.
The last question, everybody talks of learnings, but I want you to tell stakeholders sitting here or it's going live also, what they need to unlearn from the entire, what we talked about, wearables, technology, healthcare, patient care. Anybody?
We got to stop thinking about technology and start thinking about patients and people as individuals. And I think if you use that as your North Star, a lot of stuff will just follow there. So
when they're embracing new technology, they always want to hit a home run, right? Everybody wants to say, I want to build a solution that's going to be like here. And I feel that with Gen AI, every day is changing, right? Every day newer models are coming. Every day something new is coming. So don't go for the home run, right? Go to the first base first, right? Or, make the first run and then move on, right? I mean, so again, that's probably good.
It's not so much about unlearning as it is about relearning and different learning. So we understood our world, especially if you have an engineering background, in the world of numbers. You pick up any engineering textbook, you pick up any problem, a set of numbers goes in, a set of numbers goes out. And we sort of quantified our world based on numbers. And what we are learning now is that the world of inference, the world of knowledge goes far beyond numbers. But we didn't have a way of understanding that. I think the modern machine learning allows you to navigate both the world of numbers, which of course has inductive properties, as well as the world of the text. So when you look at the other way, this all text. It doesn't compare to an engineering text. But when it comes to making important decisions, the world of numbers is not enough.
It's a new world, in my opinion, because the empowerment that's happening to the actual patient is much more. The physicians have to think through it very differently. Before, the physician was the God, the Messiah, pretty much told me what was wrong with my healthcare. He or he would tell me that I should go do this at home. And if I had a question, should I give my child this? All those questions, the physician was the one person in charge that was in charge. But today, as the younger generation comes and there's the know-how, access to Googles, the chat GPTs, and the wearables happens, the patients are becoming more learned. The information is actually getting sourced to them much more. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, because you're giving them information that's over-empowering them sometimes, but sometimes they're empowered. So the physicians today need to look at it completely differently as to how do we care for a patient. Sometimes I think distributing and empowering the patient will make the physician a lot more empowered and more distributed, because his time is much more valuable. So if he can take care of pushing it somehow down to the patient, I think it's going to help him much better. So I think the thought processes, even the physician has to get access to information much more quicker. He has to understand what variables are in the market, what kind of information is accessible, what do I need to relearn. So physician's position has changed, the patient's position has changed. And I think the way the whole healthcare is going to move as we move forward, I think, just giving an anecdotal example of what can happen is, say it's some Timbuktu in Africa, right? The physician really doesn't have to even know much. He just goes to the website, orders a device, puts it on the patient wears the device, the data is transmitted automatically through his smartphone to the cloud, the entire analysis happens, and the report comes back onto the physician's table, and there's a co-pilot next to him saying that this is what we suspect, these are the possible studies you can do, these are the possible tests you can do on the patient. We also recommend that you do this so you can move the patient to the next level. So the whole burden of him diagnosing the whole problem and saying, look, I think we need to do this blood test, I need to go do this, the diagnosis itself, the kind of information that's going to be accessible is going to change in the newer world. Not only that, the patient is probably going to say, sir, I read about this in a particular forum, these are the symptoms I have, this is what it says. Those questions are going to pop up as far as the physicians is concerned. So I think the physician's role and the patient's role are both changing, and they're dynamically evolving, in my opinion.
Thank you very much.